Well, happy, beautiful, amazing day. Dr. Bob Rakowski here with this edition of, guess what, the Dr. Bob Rakowski Podcast. I've got Miss Amanda Wegman, and I'm very excited for this conversation. She is licensed and certified in mental health. She has a master's degree in nutrition and functional medicine. And you know what? Even though I've been teaching functional medicine for 3 decades, I wasn't even aware that there was a university course with that master's degree. But here's what we know. If we seek, we will find. Amanda is very, very thorough. When she works with patients, she works with them in terms of their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And today we're going to talk about the importance of recovering both emotionally and recovering the nervous system from chronic illness. So happy, beautiful day, Amanda.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
You know what? So if you seek, you find. What led you to seek certification or more wisdom in functional medicine?
Yeah, so first I became a therapist because I needed therapy. I came from a lot of alcoholism in my family, and I just always was like, I want to help people figure this out. I want to help people live happier lives. And then during my master's, during my beginning of my career as a therapist, I was working in psychiatric and detox facilities, and I just felt like this is so barbaric. Like medications and cognitive behavioral therapy really wasn't cutting it. And I was doing biohacking, listening to podcasts, and always really interested in health. So that's when I decided to go back to school for functional medicine. I was always like the chronically sick person myself. So I was looking not just for my own health, but to find answers is like, why do our Western standard medical treatments, they don't go deep enough. They don't go to the root causes. So that's when I found that master's.
Well, how wonderful. And there's a lot of things I want to say even before we move to the next one. So one, sometimes when people come from a very challenging family background, they're almost like embarrassed to admit to it. But as one of my mentors said, everything happens on the way, not in the way. And so likely your background was all part of a divine plan to put you in a better position to help people. So good for that. As part of my education, I don't have any certification in mental health, but I spent 3 days studying at this state mental hospital. And Amanda, here's what I found them feeding people at the state mental hospital: gluten, dairy, sugar. And here's what I'm going to say, the last one: BS. Yes. You have a dysfunctional brain, too bad for you. We'll medicate you for the rest of your life. So What's your tell me about that. How good is gluten, dairy, drugs, and BS for a struggling brain?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the lens of functional medicine, some of these foods and the chemicals we use to treat them are going to be inflammatory or neurotoxic even. And then some of them can deplete other nutrients and then can also just cause stress on the body that is going to further impact your nervous system health, your nutrient status, and it's just can be a cascade of inflammation. And then an inflamed brain is obviously not going to be very functional. We're going to have brain fog. We're going to have memory lapses. We're going to have depression, anxiety, depending on what's going on. So yeah, in my psychiatric hospital days, it was just like, feeding them lasagna and garlic bread for dinner. And that's when I knew like I have to go in another angle and make changes from a systemic level.
Did you see anybody getting better when you were working at the psychiatric hospital? Did you see anybody getting better?
Rarely, because they might never have came back, but the revolving door was something we joked about. People that chronically lived in the hospital, they would stabilize them enough to not be suicidal, homicidal, danger to themselves or others, or not actively detoxing, and then release right back out to the streets.
Yep. And then they come right back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so exactly.
Even in my time there was talk about that. So I asked them, does anybody get better? And they said, rarely. Mm-hmm. They die, they go to jail, or they spend the rest of their life here. So clearly we need to do something different. And what are those different things? What should we do with these people that are struggling with mental health challenges? And by the way, if that's you, it's not your fault. We have a world that is poisoning the brain every way that I can think of. So what do you like to do with these cases, and how can we move people forward?
Yeah, so I like to address what I call my 6-layer approach. So when someone is to the point where you have multiple diagnoses, whether that's physical or mental health, we know there's a toxicity component, there is a pathogen overgrowth component. But when we look at the people who recover, they don't just spend their time with targeting pathogens, with detoxing metals, they go deeper. So why would we have these overgrowths? Why would we have such a high toxicity besides just, the problems of modern day world? Well, what about our organs? Why aren't our organs functioning very well? Deeper, why aren't our hormones regulating some of these nutrients? Why are we so deficient in some of these nutrients? And the deeper you go, you start to find that a lot of these disease states start with that nervous system emotional health component and the filter that you're looking through the world through. So what we perceive, because our brains have a confirmation bias, we're going to confirm those beliefs over and over again. So if you believe I'm abandonable, maybe my parent abandoned them, maybe their parent abandoned them when they were younger, you are going to seek out situations that confirm that you are abandonable. And until we really start to heal at that root of how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the world, our nervous system regulation, how well we're able to process emotions without addictions, without collapsing, without ignoring them, without being ashamed or guilty for having these types of emotions and reactions, until we're able to experience the full spectrum of emotions and see the world through a lens that's not a limiting belief, then the cascade is more stress on the body, meaning more nutrient deficiencies, more imbalances, meaning more pathogens and overgrowth, meaning more vulnerable to the toxicities of the world, whether that's mold or metals. Your nervous system state will dictate how vulnerable you are to the toxicities really impacting you.
I want to take a spin on this. So one of my favorite speakers, authors is Brian Tracy. And he said, I used to think that people were 50% logical, 50% emotional. He says, but no, I realize they're 100% emotional. Although sometimes they have more emotion towards the logical decision or more logic towards the emotional decision, one or the other, but they're completely emotional. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I built my personality around intellectualizing everything. So I thought I wasn't super emotional because I was thinking about how I was feeling and rationalizing why I was feeling that way, which is what the brain is so amazing at doing. It will always find meaning no matter what is going on in the situation. And learning how to actually feel without intellectualizing it was the biggest turning point in my healing journey. I mean, that mind-body connection we're starting to talk about a lot more, the vagus nerve, the bidirectional input from the body up, it makes such a huge difference. And the cool thing is we don't have to have words or explanation for it. Once you learn how to actually feel, then everything kind of dissipates, everything resolves without you having to force it, without you having to micromanage it or fix it or figure it out.
I love that. I'm going to take a quick second here for a sponsor break. So bettercoffeeshop.com, the world's best organic reishi infused coffee. Go to bettercoffeeshop.com and try our 1-box challenge. All right. So we've got this bi-directional emotional circumstance. So do you want to start top down or bottom up? Where do you want to intervene on that? Or is it case by case?
Yeah, I think they're both important because you do have, if we're worried about a presentation or something we have to do in the future that hasn't even happened yet, we know our body is responding to that. Everybody knows what that feels like, right? Or if you remember something that happened and it was a not so pleasant memory, you can feel that visceral reaction. So there are techniques that would be considered top down, which like traditional therapy would be one of them. Different types of what they call brain retraining techniques, even like manifestation, law of attraction, people kind of teach a top-down approach in a lot of ways. But then the bottom up, once we are able to kind of understand that our brain is always going to make meaning, we have these trauma networks in the brain. So once one thing gets brought up, it's going to lead to other things. But that physiological response in the body, here's where we can step in and learn how to sit with that, learn how to feel it, learn how to call it what it is, name the different sensations, name the emotions, to start to bring more emotional intelligence to what is happening. And the more we're able to sit and feel, kind of like a child who's trying to get your attention, once you start to actually put all of your awareness there, like, I am listening, body, I'm listening and paying attention, it moves and it changes and it doesn't need your attention anymore. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they avoid, they have addictions and coping mechanisms to stop the feeling. But all that does is just make it louder and louder and louder.
So how do they break that pattern?
Really simple, actually. It seems almost too simple to be true. When we are feeling, let's say, a symptom, a sensation, an uncomfortable emotion, by stepping in and kind of describing it, like, what is the color? What is the feeling? What is the texture? Where is it in the body? Does it move? Even silly questions like, if it was a cartoon, would it have a job? What job would that be? When we really start to bring that awareness to these physical sensations, we can start to notice things, maybe other things coming up that need process. Like, oftentimes in a session, somebody will say, oh, I just got a flashback of this memory, or I just started feeling like I used to feel when this happened. And the subconscious will bring up the things that you're kind of ready to emotionally digest. So once it's emotionally digested, we can go back to what would be nervous system regulation. And the top-down approach would be to listen to those thoughts and ask yourself, is this the truth? Is this true for everyone? Or is this just a belief that I have because of my experiences? Was this something that was passed down to me? So I usually give people a set of questions to ask themselves when they want to process. And then I also use a lot of really gentle psychosensory techniques, like the havening technique. And then most people have heard of EFT tapping.
I'm not familiar with that. Can you explain that? What technique?
Havening is a psychosensory technique where you're just gently sweeping the face, the shoulders and the arms, and then the palms of the hands. And it is one of the most soothing things I've ever found for, like, when you need to step out of a really heightened emotional state. They've shown on brainwaves that it actually activates these slower brainwave states like theta and even delta. So it calms, self-soothes. And when you're out of that heightened emotional center of the brain, then you can kind of rationally take a look at maybe why something happened, what the trigger was, and allow yourself to feel and process the things that are coming up.
I think that self-soothing is critical. So, And what did you call that? What's that process?
It's called havening.
It's just caressing yourself, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right? Which, by the way, who doesn't like to be caressed? Yeah. Especially by a loved one. And shouldn't you love yourself, right? And that could be, I could see it being self-soothing. So I often tell people, take a deep breath, count your blessings, think of something to be grateful for. Do you have another one or two or three favorites that you can give people to self-soothe?
Yeah, one of my other favorites that's super simple is the double breath inhale. So breathing in all the way to the top and then taking another sip of air and then releasing it and allowing for that exhale to be even longer. That's one of my favorites. I do that when I lay in my bed to go to sleep at night. And then another super simple technique is just to start to move the awareness out of the brain and into the body. So feel what it feels like in your heart space and move that energy through the abdomen, the hips, the legs, and out of the bottom of the feet. And that moves that like heightened fight or flight energy out. And the more it creeps back up, you can just feel that energy moving out. Visualize. I like to visualize like water rushing over me.
So you had mentioned the nervous system and the emotional system as being critical. So in functional medicine, we often give people nutrients. We often give them detox. We often give them exercise. But what are you going to do for their nervous system?
Yeah, so I do think it's bidirectional. If you are malnourished, you will most likely have some nervous system dysregulation because our nervous system, our brain does need those nutrients. And it's stressful for the body not to have them. And then, of course, you're looking at the overgrowth and things like that happen in a really depleted state. But for nervous system regulation, besides learning some of these tools to be present, to sit with the emotions, to acknowledge what's coming up, I also am a big proponent of circadian rhythms and making sure that you are in nature as much as you possibly can be, in natural lighting as much as you possibly can be. Our brain receives signals from the light frequencies of the sun to help our body understand what type of nutrients or what type of neurotransmitters that need to be made, and hormones, and even digestive enzymes. So if we are not getting the signals from nature, if we're not touching the earth with our feet, if we are looking at blue screens after dark, our body's going to be confused. It's going to be stressed. It's going to deplete those nutrients. Your nervous system is going to be dysregulated to an extent. And, I think we're seeing that more and more these days with people that have insomnia and sleep issues because we're on our screens constantly. We're in these bright lights.
And then there's emerging information that what do we need? We need photons from the sun, we need electrons from the earth, and we need raw materials to build our body. And the more natural we make all those, all the better. What about people that live in extremely cold climates where, getting in touch with the earth barefoot, they'd freeze their feet off? What do you recommend for those folks?
So they have shown that cold exposures is also beneficial. And in the winter months, it is more of a time to have higher levels of melatonin. So there's still like a circadian cycle to our bodies, even if we live in winter. Cultures have been living in different parts of the world for thousands and thousands of years, and they adapt with the type of diet that they eat. Maybe it's not putting your bare feet in snow for very long, but you can still go outside and see natural lighting. If you have concrete or stone in your home, a lot of times that just standing on there can get the same benefits as grounding or earthing. So there's a few ways around it depending on where you live, but it's still absolutely possible. You can go out and touch a tree without putting your feet on the ground. That would also connect you.
Yeah, and beautiful plants in the home, which are nature's air purifiers and things like that. Any fun cases you want to share without naming names or giving up confidence?
Oh man, I've seen so many transformations in even just a 3-month period sometimes with people. When you are ready to receive a message, when you are ready to truly heal, when you're so sick of yourself and the things that you put yourself through, and you just are given some of the tools to do that, for so many people I've worked with, it clicks. You're like, oh, that's all I need to practice doing. I just need to set aside time to go outside and sit with my feelings. It's not actually that complicated. And when a belief comes up, like they're just doing this because they hate me, you start to really pay attention and you're able to question the why and process it and move on with your day. So, I work with a lot of people who have really severe chronic illnesses, a lot of mast cell activation syndrome, which is what I went through, and mold illness. So I've been there and I've had to do the work myself, and it seems very tedious. But the more you practice it, the more you come out the other side as this human, authentic human that maybe you didn't even know you were before. All the layers of BS just start to melt away, and you start to really figure out who you are and who you want to be. I've had clients that have left, abusive relationships, people that have moved to different countries after working together. So if you're ready, you're ready.
Well, isn't that the truth? And so, as we start looking at that, the most important person you can have a relationship with is yourself. And I remember Agmandino saying, and most of all, I will love myself, for when I do, I will zealously inspect all things that I allow to enter my mind, my heart, my soul, and my body. How challenging is that? Do you find that a challenge? Do people have a hard time loving themselves, and how can we help them with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, this is probably my biggest theme too, is like, how do I love myself more? Like, how am I not loving myself? And really, I think it comes down to being your authentic self. So some of these practices that I teach, that I do with people, teach you how to feel your intuition of what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And as simple as that sounds, we are a society of people pleasing and doing things for clout, for money, all sorts of reasons why people have certain behaviors and choose certain things in life. But if you at a heart level can tell that I enjoy doing this feels good to me, being around these people feel good, and that is a boundary, this feels bad, I'm not going to go down that route, then you will always be able to navigate, who do I want to be, what is in authentic alignment. And when you really start to do that, you'll find that you do start to love yourself, because you're not faking it. You're not doing things for other people. And you start to figure out who you are and how to love yourself in your own unique way.
That is so beautiful, Amanda. I had a consult with a stage 4 cancer patient earlier this morning. And he seemed to be losing hope. And he was a very high achiever. And so the comment I made to him is, the biggest quantum leaps in my life have come when my back was against the wall and I didn't want it there. I didn't plan on it being there, but I didn't have a choice. And so have you seen that? And how can we maybe use that wisdom to inspire people to look, whatever you're going through, it's meant to be? How can we inspire people to take those steps under those? Because I'm imagining you talk to people that have been in worse circumstances than I've ever even imagined.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of felt the same way. And with my kind of niche of dealing and working with mast cell activation, most people have a hard time tolerating almost anything. And really the only thing we can do is these gentle nervous system regulation, emotional, dipping our toe in emotional processing. And that's all we can do. And so it's almost like I see that as, this is your neon pointing sign that this is where to put the focus, that this is the only thing you're able to do, like you said, back up against a wall, and that this is the most important. So we'll always find our purpose and passion, once it's over usually. But as long as you keep putting one foot forward and keep showing up for yourself, eventually you will see that, like, oh, I understand why this happened. I understand the lessons, the virtues I was supposed to learn, because our souls are here to learn virtues, and we can either learn them through pain and struggle and hardship, or we can learn them through easier, more pleasurable ways. So always finding that.
It's ancient wisdom, that which hurts instructs. I believe Ben Franklin said that. And why, I don't think we have the answer to that. Why is it that sometimes we need to go through some serious stuff before we take a serious look at what needs to change?
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, what advice do you have for people as we wrap up? This time just flew. If you could say, listen, if you do this, your whole world is going to be better. What would you advise people to do?
Well, that's a tough question because everyone is so different. But I would say that the inner work, whatever you want to call it, whether that's belief work, nervous system regulation, sitting with yourself, learning some of these somatic tools, you can't take this away from people once they learn it. Like once you get it, like I said, sometimes it just clicks, and these tools should be taught in like kindergarten, right? So that I think makes the biggest difference for people. You could get a degree in functional medicine, but it didn't help me. I still got very sick after. You can learn all the cool supplements and all the cool biohacks out there, but it won't put a dent if you really need this emotional healing. Yeah.
So whatever your weak link is, 80% of commercial buildings have mold, 40% of residential have mold. Mold is getting a lot of press, but if we're strong enough, one, I don't ever recommend living in a toxic environment, but if we're strong enough, then maybe we start feeling a little off, and that gets our attention. We don't have to get so beat down that we have a hard time functioning. Amanda, I think you have so much goodness. In fact, I not only think, I know you have so much goodness to offer the world. Where can people find you? What's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so my website is thehealerrevolution.com. And then
TheHealerRevolution.com. I love the name, TheHealerRevolution.com.
Yep. And that's also my podcast, which you'll be on soon. And then my Instagram is where I do most everything. It's at Amanda Panacea, Panacea.
Wonderful. And how did you come up with that name?
Well, the word panacea is she's the Greek goddess of healing. And the word means like a healing elixir, a solution to all problems. I thought that was appropriate.
It is appropriate. You're a virtuologist. You're a functional medicine, connoisseur. You are just a great human adding value to the world. I'm honored to have had this conversation with you. And the thing I like most about you is you're just getting warmed up. The amount of people that you are going to help is going to create a beautiful ripple throughout the universe. And I'm going to wrap up with these words. I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful.